I wasn't supposed to be stationed here. I had signed up for the usual. Base security, overseas deployment, maybe even a few classified ops if I got lucky. But when my orders came through, they weren't for any location I recognized. No city, no official name, just a set of coordinates in the middle of the Nevada desert. They flew me in under the cover of night, blacked out windows, no briefing until we landed. That was the first red flag. The base itself wasn't much to look at. Just a few low, squat buildings, some watchtowers, a mess hall and barracks, surrounded by miles of nothing. No fences, no visible perimeter. Just sand and rock stretching out in every direction. It didn't make sense. Every military installation I'd ever seen was locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But here? No barbed wire, no patrols outside the immediate area. It was like they weren't trying to keep people out, but something else in. I knew from the moment I stepped off the transport that something was wrong. It wasn't just the silence, though that was unsettling enough. It was the way the air felt heavy, thick in a way I couldn't explain, like I was walking through something invisible. And then there were the other soldiers, blank-faced, stiff, like they were going through the motions of military life without actually living it. They didn't joke, didn't complain, didn't even talk unless absolutely necessary. I'd never seen anything like it. My first night there, I learned the rule. We were sitting in the barracks, a few of us new arrivals, still adjusting to the eerie atmosphere. One guy, a corporal from Georgia Davis, I think his name was, lit up a cigarette and wandered outside. Less than a minute later, the sirens went off, loud, wailing, the kind that shakes you to your bones. The rest of us just sat there, frozen, until the door burst open and 3 MPs stormed in. They didn't say a word to us, just grabbed Davis, dragged him back inside, and forced him to the ground. One of the officers knelt beside him, gripping his face so hard I thought he might break the guy's jaw. And then, in a low, measured voice, he said, "You do not look at the sky." Davis was shaking, muttering something under his breath, but the officer didn't care. He just repeated it, slow, calm, like he was explaining it to a child. "You do not look at the sky." Then they hauled him out, and we never saw him again. That was the second red flag. None of us asked questions after that. It didn't matter if we were confused, scared, or just plain curious. The message was clear. Some things weren't meant to be questioned, and looking up at the sky, that was one of them. I tried to act normal, follow orders, keep my head down, but the rule ate at me. It didn't make sense. Was it some kind of psychological experiment? Some classified tech being tested overhead? I ran through every possibility, but nothing felt right. Days passed and I started to notice more strange things. The base had no clocks, no windows in the barracks. Even the watches they issued us were digital, cycling through numbers that seemed off. Sometimes minutes would stretch, other times they'd vanish, like time itself was stuttering. But the strangest part was the sky, or rather the way no one acknowledged it. Every movement on base was deliberate. If we had to go outside, we kept our eyes straight ahead. The MPs patrolling the area wore mirrored visors, heads slightly tilted down as they walked. Even the security cameras were angled awkwardly, always pointing at the ground or at waist level, never up. At first I thought it might have been some kind of light pollution experiment, maybe something so bright it could blind us if we looked directly at it. But that didn't explain the fear, because that's what it was. Fear. One night, I woke up to the sound of something moving outside. Not footsteps, not wind, something else. A noise too big for the empty desert. A slow, deliberate shifting, like sand pouring through a massive hourglass. I lay there frozen, listening as it scraped across the ground until it stopped, right outside our barracks. I held my breath. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin like it had weight. And then, through the walls, I heard it. A whisper. Not words. Not in any language I could recognize. Just a sound, soft and distant, curling through the silence like smoke. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering, willing it to go away. And then the siren started again, louder this time, wailing through the base like a dying animal. I heard boots pounding outside, the heavy clatter of weapons being drawn, and underneath it all, that whisper, rising. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The walls trembled. The air felt like it was about to burst, stretching and stretching until silence. The sirens cut off. The footsteps stopped. The air settled. And just like that, it was over. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. None of us did. And when morning came, the base continued like nothing had happened. No explanations, no questions. But I knew then, without a doubt, whatever was out there, whatever was above us, it wasn't meant to be seen. After that night, I started to notice things I hadn't before. It wasn't just the way we avoided looking up. It was how the base itself seemed to be designed to keep us from doing so. The buildings had overhanging roofs that extended further than necessary, forcing us to keep our gaze low when walking between them. The few vehicles we had were fitted with sun visors that stretched unnaturally far down the windshields. Even the outdoor lights, tall floodlights that should have been pointing up, were all angled toward the ground, casting long, unnatural shadows. It was all intentional. Everything about this place was built to stop us from seeing the sky. I told myself I'd keep my head down and follow orders. But knowing something is off and ignoring it are two different things. My brain wouldn't let it go. Then came the incident with Carter. Carter was one of the newer guys, stationed a few weeks before me. He was quiet, kept to himself, but he was sharp, too sharp. Unlike the rest of us, he didn't settle into the mindless routine. He was watching, piecing things together. One evening, just before lights out, he muttered something to me. "You ever wonder why there's no aircraft?" It hit me like a slap, because he was right. We were at a military base in the middle of nowhere, and I had never once seen a plane, a chopper, or even a damn drone. No supply runs, no training exercises, nothing. I had no answer for him, and I think that's when he made his decision. That night, Carter broke the rule. It must have been close to midnight when I heard it, a sharp, choked-off yell from outside. Not the sirens this time. Just one voice. By the time I got to the barracks door, it was too late. Carter was standing in the open, eyes locked upward, body frozen like a man caught in the jaws of something enormous. His hands were trembling, his mouth was open, not screaming, not speaking, just open. I wanted to call out to him to drag him back inside, but something held me in place. Some deep, primal instinct warning me, do not interfere. Then the MPs were there. They moved fast, faster than I thought possible. 5 of them surrounded Carter in an instant, tackling him to the ground. One of them shoved a cloth over his face, and within seconds, he stopped moving, not dead, just limp, unconscious. They carried him off, disappearing into one of the restricted buildings near the edge of the base, the ones we were told never to approach. I never saw Carter again. But the next morning, at breakfast, something worse happened. A new soldier sat in his place. Same uniform, same build, even the same short brown hair. But it wasn't him. I knew Carter's face. I had seen it every day for weeks. The man sitting there, eating his food in silence. He was close, but he wasn't Carter. Nobody else reacted. Nobody even looked at him twice. It was like Carter had never existed. That was the moment I realized something was deeply, horrifyingly wrong. This place didn't just make people disappear, it replaced them. I stopped talking after that, stopped trying to make sense of things. The fear had settled into my bones, and I finally understood why the others acted like walking corpses. It wasn't just discipline, it was survival. Days turned into weeks. I followed the routine: wake up, eat, train, stand guard, sleep, repeat. It was easier that way, pretending I didn't notice the oddities, ignoring the missing faces, looking anywhere but up. But my body knew what my brain refused to acknowledge. Every time I stepped outside, something inside me recoiled. My skin prickled. My stomach turned. It was like standing near the edge of a cliff in total darkness, like something was waiting just out of sight. And then one night, I heard it again. The whispering. This time, it was closer. I was on watch duty near the outer perimeter, stationed by one of the low concrete buildings that we never entered. The desert stretched out beyond me, black and endless. No moon, no stars, just darkness. Then came the noise. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It was something vast shifting above me, a pressure in the air, a hum that vibrated through my skull. And beneath it, those whispers, thousands of them. I gritted my teeth, gripping my rifle so hard my knuckles cracked. I wanted to run, wanted to get inside, but my body wouldn't move. And then, for the first time since arriving at this base, I felt it. Something watching me. Not a person, not a drone. Something massive, endless. The weight of its gaze pressed down on me, crushing, suffocating. My breathing turned ragged, my vision blurred. My body screamed at me to move, but I couldn't. The whispers grew louder. I clenched my jaw so hard I tasted blood. It was speaking to me, not with words, not with anything human, but I understood. It was offering something. I don't know how long I stood there, seconds, minutes, hours. Then, footsteps, heavy boots pounding toward me. A hand grabbed my shoulder, yanking me back, and suddenly the air shifted. The pressure lifted. The whispers stopped. I gasped, sucking in a breath like I'd been drowning. It was an MP, face hidden behind a visor, voice flat, emotionless. Inside, now. I didn't argue. I stumbled back into the building, my legs weak, my pulse still racing. I expected punishment, another disappearance. But they didn't drag me away. They didn't say another word. They just stared at me, like they were waiting to see what I would do next. After that night, I stopped sleeping. Not just because of the fear, but because every time I closed my eyes, I felt like I was slipping away, like something was pulling at me from a place I couldn't see. My dreams, when I had them, weren't dreams at all. They were glimpses of something vast, something impossible. Shapes that didn't make sense, patterns that didn't exist. And always that feeling of being watched. But the worst part? Nobody said anything about what happened to me. Not the MPs, not the other soldiers. They saw me nearly break the rule. They saw how close I had come to looking. And yet, the next morning, it was like nothing had happened. No punishment, no warning, just silent stares from faces that barely seemed human anymore. I knew I was on borrowed time. I started paying closer attention to the other men, watching the ones who had been there the longest. And that's when I realized something terrifying. They weren't aging. Their faces were still lined with exhaustion, their bodies still worn from training. But the ones who had been here for years looked exactly the same as the ones who had arrived months ago. No fresh scars, no graying hair, no weight loss or gain. It was like time had stopped for them. I felt sick. I had to get out. That night, I made my decision. I didn't care what it took. I didn't care what was out there. If I stayed, I would disappear. Maybe not physically, but something worse. I would become one of them. I waited until the barracks were silent. I had no idea what security measures were in place, but I had seen something before, when they took Carter. The restricted buildings near the edge of the base, the ones we weren't allowed near, that's where they had taken him. That's where answers had to be. I slipped out of my bunk, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn back. But I forced myself to move. The air outside was wrong. It wasn't cold, wasn't warm, just empty. A dead space that carried no sound, no life. My boots crunched softly against the sand as I made my way toward the restricted area, each step feeling heavier than the last. Then I heard it, a wet, dragging sound, slow, methodical, coming from somewhere above. I didn't stop. I didn't look up. I reached the nearest building and pressed myself against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. The sound was closer now.
impossibly close, like something massive was shifting just above the rooftop. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay in place, forcing myself not to look. And then, a voice, soft, right against my ear. "You see us." I lost control. My head jerked up. For a fraction of a second I saw it. The sky wasn't the sky. It was alive. A massive, writhing thing that stretched beyond comprehension. Eyes, thousands of them, blinking in and out of existence, shifting in patterns my mind couldn't process. Mouths, not human, but vast and hungry, whispering in words I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. It wasn't just above us, it was everywhere, and it was looking back at me.
My mind snapped. I don't mean that as an exaggeration. I mean something inside me broke. A part of my brain that was supposed to keep me sane, to keep me human, shattered into a million pieces the moment I understood what I was looking at. I wasn't staring at the sky. I was staring at something else entirely, something that wasn't supposed to exist. I felt my body lock up, every muscle seizing, every nerve burning like I'd been doused in ice water. My vision blurred at the edges, my ears filled with a high-pitched ringing. My mind was rejecting what I had seen. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. The thing above me, the thing that was the sky, shifted. The mouths whispered, not with sound, but with meaning. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. They were theirs. They poured into me like liquid, filling every empty space inside my head with something vast and endless. I saw things, not memories, not dreams, just understanding. I saw the base from above, but not just this base. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them, scattered across the world like tiny scars on the skin of something immeasurably large. I saw the soldiers who had been here the longest, their bodies still standing, still moving, but empty. Puppets, held together by invisible strings. I saw myself. A small, insignificant thing, trembling beneath an infinite expanse of eyes. A fragile creature who was never meant to know. And then, I felt it reaching for me. Not physically, not in any way I could describe. It was reaching for my mind, myself. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't cruel. It was simply hungry. It wanted to make me part of it. I felt my thoughts unraveling, my memories peeling away like dead skin. I was losing myself. I was disappearing. And then, pain. A sharp burning agony in my side, snapping me back to my body. I collapsed onto the sand, gasping, my vision swimming with black spots. Someone had hit me. No, stabbed me. I turned my head, choking on my own breath, and saw him. An MP, visor reflecting the shifting mass above, bloodied knife in his hand. His face was expressionless, not angry, not afraid, just focused. I didn't understand. Why stab me? Why? And then it hit me. Pain was grounding me, keeping me tethered to my body, to reality. He hadn't stabbed me to kill me. He had done it to save me. I gasped, the pain flooding my senses, drowning out the whispers, the pull of the thing above. My body was mine again. My thoughts were mine again. I staggered to my feet, barely holding on to consciousness. The MP grabbed my arm, dragging me back toward the barracks, moving fast like he had done this before. I couldn't fight him. I didn't want to fight him. I just let him pull me away, my feet barely working, my mind still reeling from what I had seen. The last thing I heard before the doors slammed shut behind us was a voice, not from the MP, not from the soldiers inside. From it, soft, amused. Not yet.
I woke up in the infirmary. My side was bandaged, the pain a dull throb beneath layers of gauze and antiseptic. For a second I thought maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing, that maybe I'd just collapsed from exhaustion and hallucinated everything else. But then I looked around. The infirmary was empty. No nurses, no doctors, just rows of beds all neatly made except for mine. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, buzzing like a swarm of insects. And outside the window, Nothing. Not desert. Not buildings, just black. My heart started pounding. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. I forced myself to move, sliding out of the bed and stumbling toward the door. My body felt wrong, too light, like gravity itself was thinner here. I opened the door, stepping out into a hallway that should have led back to the main part of the base, but it didn't. It led to another hallway, identical. Fluorescent lights, blank white walls, the same buzzing hum echoing through the air. I turned a corner, same hallway, another corner, same hallway. I don't know how long I walked, minutes, hours, but the layout never changed, the lights never flickered, the hum never stopped. I started panicking. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My vision swam, and that's when I saw them, the others. At first, I thought they were soldiers, people who had been stationed here like me. But as they got closer, I realized how wrong I was. They looked like soldiers, uniforms, boots. The same blank expressions I'd seen every day since arriving, but their eyes were wrong, too wide, too bright. And when they opened their mouths to speak, their jaws unhinged, stretching too far down their necks, their voices overlapping like a chorus of static. "You see us now?" I ran. I don't even remember deciding to run. My body just reacted, propelling me down the endless hallway, my lungs burning, my side splitting with pain. The things followed, their footsteps echoing all around me, too many to count. I sprinted through corridor after corridor, turning blindly, hoping I'd somehow find a door, a window, something. But the building stretched on forever, an infinite maze of sterile white walls and buzzing lights, and then I hit a door, a metal door cold against my skin. I slammed into it, grabbing the handle and wrenching it open without thinking. I tumbled through and fell onto sand. I looked up, my heart hammering, expecting to see the night sky. Instead, I saw it again, the thing, the living, breathing mass above the base, the writhing shape that pretended to be the sky. It pulsed and shifted, eyes blinking in and out of existence, mouths opening and closing in slow, hungry patterns. And it was closer now. I felt something inside me snap. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't pretend. I couldn't unsee it. I screamed until my throat shredded, until blood filled my mouth, until I collapsed onto the sand, shaking and broken, and the sky just watched me, like it was waiting, like it knew. I don't remember being dragged back inside. One moment, I was on the ground, staring up into it, my mind unraveling thread by thread. The next, I was back in my bunk, drenched in sweat, my bandages fresh, my uniform neatly folded at the foot of my bed, like nothing had happened, but something had changed. I sat up, my body trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I wasn't alone. There was someone sitting on the bunk across from me, the MP, the one who had stabbed me. His visor was off now. I could see his face. Just another soldier, ordinary in every way except for his eyes. They were tired. Older than they should have been, like he had seen too much, like he had carried something for too long. He spoke in a low voice. "You should be dead." I swallowed, my throat raw, my body still burning, with the remnants of whatever had touched me outside. "What the hell is going on?" I croaked. The MP didn't answer. He just studied me for a long moment, then let out a slow, exhausted sigh. "You're leaving?" That caught me off guard. I blinked at him, not sure I had heard him right. "What?" "You got too close," he said. "You looked. You saw." He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them, even though the room wasn't cold. "They won't kill you, not now, but you can't stay." I shook my head. "I don't." "They're going to put you on a transport at dawn," he cut me off. "You'll be flown back to a regular base, given a new assignment, a new story. You'll be reassigned, and you'll never speak of this again." His eyes locked onto mine. "Because if you do, they'll make sure you disappear for real." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, still reeling from what I had seen, from what had nearly taken me. I didn't know what to say. He stood up. "You were lucky," he said. "Don't push it." Then he turned and walked out of the barracks, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I should have felt relief. I was getting out. I had survived, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt wrong, like something had followed me back. Dawn came. Just like he had said, a transport arrived, a sleek, black aircraft with no markings, its engines eerily silent. 2 men in suits, not military, escorted me inside. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. As we lifted off, I glanced out the window. The base shrank below me, the building small and insignificant against the endless desert. And then I made the mistake of looking past it, at the horizon, at the sky. It wasn't morning yet. The stars should have still been out, but they weren't. There was only darkness, a shifting, writhing nothingness, and as we flew higher, I swear I saw something move inside it, a shape too big to comprehend, a presence too vast to name, something watching, something waiting. The MP was right. I was getting out, but I would never be free, because now I knew the truth. The sky isn't real, and whatever is up there, it sees everything.